Well, welcome back. Here we are in Isaiah 33 today, continuing in the book of Judgment. We'll be almost finishing it this week, but moving on for sure next week into the book of Hezekiah. Right now, though, we're looking at chapter 33, which I've titled Deceivers and Believers. You could also talk about enemies and the remnant as another way to divide this up or label the chapter. It surfaces one of the important themes that we find in the book of Isaiah, this theme of waiting. Waiting is something that characterizes the remnant of God. They are waiting patiently for Him, waiting patiently and confidently and expectantly, even though there's judgment happening all around them. Great lesson for us as we are in unstable times. Sometimes for some Christians, difficult times. I think here in the West, we're primarily, comparatively speaking, inconvenienced, whereas the rest of the world is suffering really direct persecution. So this is good to keep in mind. For chapter 33, then, I've looked at verses 1 through 12 as a section about judgment. And then 13 through the end of the chapter, verse 24, is a discussion about the privileges, the joys, the benefits that the remnant, God's believers, will enjoy. Look how this starts. Ah, you destroyers. Take note of that. What is God addressing here? He's addressing that destructive force, that Assyrian force that's coming upon northern Israel, and we'll see in later chapters is going to roll right up to the walls of Jerusalem. These destroyers who yourself have not been destroyed, you traitor whom none has betrayed. When you have ceased to destroy, you will be destroyed. Earlier chapters we've seen how the Lord has used Assyria as an instrument in his hand, and then said he's going to turn around and punish Assyria for what they've done. So how can God do this with justice and mercy? Well, what we have to keep in mind is the fallenness. Theologians call it the depravity of man. Not that man is as bad as he possibly could be, but that every aspect of man's being has been tainted by sin, to such an extent that even when they intend to do good, it is evil. What we see is Assyria doing what they intend to do, which is evil, and God using their evil intention to carry out his plan, his decrees, his purpose. And then, in righteousness, then, God turns around and judges the evil Assyrians, and that's what we see here. But look at the remnant during this time in verse 2. O Lord, be gracious to us. We wait for you. Be our arm every morning, our salvation in the time of trouble. So here we have the remnant in the midst of the judgment of the Assyrians, in the midst of the onslaught that comes from the Assyrians. The remnant are not shaken. The remnant are not moved from their faith, their reliance, their trust in the Lord, even though they may be experiencing difficult times, even though the remnant may be somehow suffering as the Assyrians roll across the land. The remnant may even die in the onslaught, but nevertheless, they rely on the Lord. They rely on his faithfulness, his mercy. After all, we learn the lesson from Jesus and Lazarus, that it isn't the lack of death that marks us out as God's remnant, but our ultimate resurrection to glory that marks us out. Go down to verse 10. There's a time when the Assyrians will face judgment. And God looks forward to this time and says, Now I will arise, says the Lord. Now I will lift myself up. Now I will be exalted. Lord here is announcing that his purposes for the Assyrians has come to an end. Reversal is going to happen. and that he is going to bring judgment on them. Beginning in verse 13 then, he summons the people to see what he's done, to hear what he's done. Here you are far, far off, what I have done, and you who are near acknowledge my might. The sinners in Zion are afraid. Trembling has seized the godless. Who among us can dwell with the consuming fire? Who among us can dwell with everlasting burnings? Great question. Who's going to stand in this? Who's going to survive? Who's going to pull through? Verse 15 answers that question. He who walks righteously and speaks uprightly. He who despises the gains of oppression, who shakes his hands lest they hold a bribe, who stops his eyes from hearing of bloodshed and shuts his eyes from looking on evil. Who's going to stand firm? Those who turn away from evil and turn to the Lord. Love that imagery about shaking out your hands to shake away a bribe. Go away, get away from me. I don't want that. That the righteous, the upright, the remnant will resist evil. That's who's going to be standing during this time of judgment. That's who's going to survive what God has done. What will be the outcome of the remnant? It says he will dwell on the heights. His place of defense will be the fortress of rocks. His bread will be given to him, his water to be sure. I think of Elijah here, who was standing alone against Ahab and Jezebel, and God protected him. God fed him in the wilderness. God took care of him. I think of Jesus, 40 days in the desert, tempted by Satan, and Jesus rebuffed him, and he was attended then by angels that supported him. Verse 17, your eyes will behold the King in his beauty. They will see a land that stretches far. Of course, for the resurrected deceivers, for the resurrected enemies of the Lord, they'll see the King in his beauty, but it'll be a terrible sight for them. It'll be a sight of impending doom for them, not of great reward. Verse 18, your heart will muse on the terror. Where he who counted, where is he who weighed the tribute? Where is he who counted the towers? So again, the remnant are going to look back on that time of terror, and they're going to look back and think about that and learn the lessons of how the terror against God's people, the opposition of God, is fleeting. It doesn't last. Those who tried to make calculations for offensive or defensive operations will be put to shame. Verse 19, you will see no more the insolent people, the people of an obscure speech you cannot comprehend, a stammering tongue that you cannot understand. Behold Zion, the city of your appointed feasts. So it's as if the Lord is gathering them up, walking them to the edge of, let's say, the Mount of Olives, and saying, look, behold, here is Zion before you. What a great reward that await the remnant. What a great reward for those who are faithful to the Lord, even during times of difficulty. And I know, brothers and sisters, that you are facing difficulty in your life now. The Lord lets those difficulties in to shape us and form us and make us more like Christ. I know that he is faithful to you, that he is helping you stand through them. And by standing, you can look forward to sharing in this great vision of the exalted Lord, high and risen up, reigning from Jerusalem. A couple lessons for us here today. No one who oppresses God's people will escape. There's going to be an ultimate vindication, that the evil will be shown to be evil and the righteous will be vindicated. They're shown to be God's righteous, God's remnant. That ultimately the evil will be judged. The oppressors will be identified. The faithful remnant will receive these fabulous and eternal blessings that come from God. As Paul quotes to the Corinthians, no eye has seen and no ear has heard what God has prepared for his people, for those who love him. He gives us a glimpse. He gives us a foretaste of what's coming. But ultimately, brothers and sisters, we can look forward to this ultimate restoration. Look in verse 22 just finally. For the Lord is our judge, the Lord is our lawgiver, the Lord is our king. Love that threefold division of government that finds its pinnacle in the Lord himself. Judge, there's the judicial branch, lawgiver, there is the judicial branch, I guess, the judge and lawgiver, and the king, the ruler. He's all of these for us. He is our judge. He's like our Supreme Court. He's like our Senate and Congress that pass laws. He's like our king, our presidential branch that rules over us. Finally, he will save us. Recalling Isaiah chapter 17, the promise of the coming Emmanuel. Chapter 11, the promise of the coming king who will bring peace. Chapter 2, the promise of the coming Messiah who's going to judge and rule over the earth. This is what we have to look forward to, brothers and sisters. So take heart, our king is coming. The Lord's coming is near. He'll come and he'll rule and reign, and he'll be our judge, our lawgiver, and our king. God bless you.